A black Range Rover rolled through the iron gates of Palm Harbor Estates, its engine purring softly in the afternoon heat. Richard Warren, 43, a self-made tech entrepreneur, had just returned from 3 months in Stockholm. His cream-colored suit was wrinkled from the flight, his eyes heavy with jet lag. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to witness. As the SUV turned onto Magnolia Lane, he saw her. A small figure in a bright sapphire blue dress, standing at the neighbor's doorstep. His daughter. His Lily. Holding an empty plastic container, her bare feet dirty, her brown hair tangled and unwashed. Have you ever returned home to find everything you thought was safe had fallen apart? Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do in Richard's shoes? The neighbor, Mr. Peterson, opened his door. Richard watched, frozen, as the man lifted his coffee mug and poured the dark liquid onto the concrete. The mug shattered. Droplets splashed onto Lily's feet. Go beg somewhere else, kid. Your dad's loaded. Why's he got you out here like this? Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel. His entire world shattered with that coffee mug. The afternoon sun scorched Palm Harbor Estates. The heat was so intense that the air felt completely still. Bone-white mansions stood silent behind rows of palm trees, their concrete driveways gleaming under the blazing light. Richard Warren had built his fortune from nothing, a small software startup that became a tech empire. His European heritage gave him sharp features, gray-green eyes, and a quiet intensity that made boardrooms fall silent when he spoke. But none of that mattered now. He killed the engine and removed his sunglasses, squinting at the house before him. The Warren mansion had been his pride, a place where, on every return, he expected to hear his daughter's laughter echoing from the porch. Today, the gate hung open. The lights were off. The flower beds were dead. Richard frowned. There was no reason for the house to look abandoned. His wife Sarah had assured him over video calls that everything was fine. "We're great," she'd said, her smile tired but convincing. "Don't worry about us." He opened the car door. The heat rising from the asphalt mixed with the smell of dried leaves. Then he heard it, a soft knocking sound coming from down the street. "What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video." Richard looked up. A small girl stood in front of the Peterson residence home to the neighborhood's grumpiest resident. She looked fragile, her brown hair disheveled, clutching an empty plastic container. A gust of wind lifted the hem of her dress slightly. That dress. Bright sapphire blue. The one he'd sent Lily from Sweden. Richard took a few steps forward, narrowing his eyes. The Petersons' door swung open. A middle-aged man with a prominent belly, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and holding a coffee mug, stared at the girl like she was a complete stranger. "You're one of those Warren kids, right?" Lily stepped back, her voice tiny, almost swallowed by the heavy, hot air. "I just wanted to ask if you had any cookies, sir." Mr. Peterson raised an eyebrow and let out a dry, contemptuous laugh. He lifted his coffee mug, tilted his hand, and the thick brown liquid spilled directly onto the cement. "Coming to beg? Your dad's loaded, right? Rich enough to leave his kid out here begging?" The coffee mug shattered on the ground. Some drops splashed onto Lily's bare feet. She flinched, stepping back, hugging the empty container tightly. Richard stood frozen. Every sound around him seemed to fade. His daughter, the one he believed was safe and well cared for, in that enormous house, was being humiliated in broad daylight. He started walking, his steps urgent and heavy. His jacket slipped from his shoulder, landing in a puddle. Mr. Peterson looked up just in time to notice the man approaching. Richard's gaze was so intense and cold it stopped the neighbor dead. Without uttering a single word, Richard knelt down and wrapped Lily in his arms. The girl was stunned. Then she broke into convulsive sobs. He pulled her into his jacket, his breathing ragged, his hands trembling slightly. Double quotes, daddy. Daddy. Just one short word. Choked with emotion, Richard lifted her into his arms, holding her as fiercely as if he feared someone might try to tear her away. Mr. Peterson stammered. I didn't realize it was. Richard looked at him sideways. You better get back inside your house. His voice was hoarse, not raised, but enough to silence the man completely. Mr. Peterson could only swallow before retreating into his house. The door slamming shut. Did Mr. Peterson deserve what happened? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The wind picked up. Dark clouds gathered, and darkness descended over the street. Richard crossed the road, carrying his daughter. Rain began to fall cold and sharp. Lily trembled in his arms, her face pressed against his shoulder. Daddy, I'm scared. It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's home now. He spoke softly, walking faster. The gate to the Warren mansion was still open. Richard entered directly. The stone pathway was covered with dried leaves, and some flower pots hung lifeless. He pushed the front door. The hinges squeaked. A damp, unpleasant stench mixed with the smell of alcohol and spoiled food assaulted his nose. He paused, looking at Lily. Stay here, okay? She nodded, clutching her father's jacket. He gently placed her on a chair in the foyer, then ventured deeper inside. The floor was sticky, covered with empty bottles, takeout containers, and crumpled newspapers. On the dining table, dirty dishes were piled high, buzzing with flies. The walls were stained with moisture. The house that used to shine with light every night was now completely dark, illuminated only by occasional lightning flashes through the windows. If this was your home, what would be the first thing you'd do? Comment below. The air was thick and humid, as if no one had opened a window in days. The bright living room where Lily once ran, singing and hugging her teddy bear, was now engulfed in trash-broken toys and beer cans scattered everywhere. The TV was on but muted. On the screen, an old news report, images of a storm from 3 weeks ago. The flickering light reflected off the yellowish stains on the walls, making the room seem to exhale despair. Richard placed Lily on the couch. Her eyes were distant, her wet hair stuck to her cheeks, her small hands gripping the edge of her father's coat. He leaned down gently, brushing the damp strands from her forehead. Sit here, honey. Don't be afraid. Lily didn't speak, just nodded slightly, her gaze fixed on the darkness at the end of the hallway. In the kitchen, a yellowish light flickered. Richard entered, his foot catching an empty wine bottle that rolled and cracked under his heel. At the table, a woman was slumped over, her blonde hair disheveled, her shoulders trembling slightly. He approached. Sarah. No response. Just a faint gasp and the strong smell of alcohol. He placed a hand on her shoulder and shook her gently. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face gaunt, with deep circles under her eyes. For a moment, he didn't recognize his own wife. Richard? You're back? Sarah managed to smile, but it was crooked and broken. I didn't think you'd be home so soon. He remained silent, looking around. He pointed at the table bottles, scattered unpaid bills, a broken family photograph lying on the floor, its glass cracked. What is all this? Would you forgive someone who let things fall apart like this? Let me know in the comments. Sarah looked down, quickly picking up the photo and wiping it with her sleeve. Her voice was weak. Just a small problem. Richard walked to the refrigerator. When he opened it, a strong sour smell escaped. Inside, there was only a bloated carton of milk, some moldy bread slices, and a liquor store debt notice taped to the door. He took the note, his eyes darkening. A small problem? Sarah stood up, stumbling, leaning against the table. Don't look at me like that. The money you sent, I had to pay debts. I didn't want the kid going back to school. Sarah, paying debts with liquor? Richard's voice was low and intense. He never raised his voice, but the sound of it now was enough to freeze the room. Sarah stepped back, her eyes filling with tears. You don't understand. For the last 3 months, I've been completely alone. In the living room, Lily slowly walked around the coffee table, picking up a doll with a broken head. She looked at it for a moment, then set it back down. Her eyes were empty, her shoulders trembling slightly. Richard turned to look at her, a knot forming in his throat. He approached and searched the kitchen. There was nothing edible. Finally, he took a glass, filled it with tap water, and offered it to Lily. Drink this, sweetheart. She took it, her hands shaking slightly. I'm not thirsty, Daddy. Richard placed his hand on her head. Please, just a little, okay? Sarah stood behind them, her voice hoarse. Don't act like I'm a terrible person. I took care of her. I even bought some pastries yesterday. Richard didn't turn around. She just went to the Petersons' house to beg for food. Sarah froze. A second later, she laughed a harsh, broken sound. That old man's probably lying. You know these neighbors have hated me for years. Richard stepped closer, looking directly into her eyes. I saw it with my own eyes. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. The air grew heavy. Sarah bit her lip, her hands clenched. I just stepped out for a moment. Maybe she was hungry. I would have done things differently if... Richard's tone was absolute, deep, and cold. She was dishonored right there in the street. Sarah turned her back, grabbing a bottle from the table, her hand trembling as she uncapped it. Don't act like you're perfect. You weren't even here. Richard stayed silent for a few seconds. I thought you were okay. That's what you said every time I called. Yeah, I was lying. Sarah shouted, tears mixing with sweat. You abandoned me here with the kid, with the debt, with this house. I was terrified. Every day waking up not knowing how I'd pay for things. Richard took a step back, looking at the stained floor. His heart felt heavy. But he remembered the long nights in Stockholm, where his phone screen only showed Sarah's tired smile. Everything's fine, she'd insisted. Now he understood it was a veil hiding desperation. Thunder rolled, and the lights flickered. Lily curled up, covering her head with her hands. Richard knelt down and lifted her. Enough, we're leaving. Sarah slammed the wine bottle against the wall. Liquid splattered everywhere. You can't take her. She's mine. She's mine. Richard stopped at the door without looking back. Whose is she? He tightened his embrace around his daughter and kept walking. Sarah ran after him, grabbing the staircase railing. Richard, please. But her voice broke, half plea, half lost. What would you do if you were Richard? Drop your answer below. He pushed the door open. Rain hit them like a cold curtain. Lily clung to her father, her breath coming in short gasps. Daddy, look at Mommy, she whispered, turning her head back. Richard tightened his arms, afraid to look. Don't look, sweetheart. Outside, thunder roared. Lightning flashed. In that instant, Sarah's shadow stretched across the kitchen floor. Then she collapsed. The glass in her hand fell, shattering. Wine leaked out, mixing with the rain that had entered, reflecting the flickering yellow light. Richard ran through the yard with his daughter, his steps splashing through water. Behind him, the house door slammed shut with a long, mournful wail of the wind, as if it were devouring everything ins. Lily kept looking out the rear window, her lips moving to say something indistinct. Richard started the engine, his hands gripping the wheel, his eyes fixed ahead, where lightning tore through the night sky. The Range Rover pulled away, its headlights cutting through the thick curtain of rain. The heavy rain continued relentlessly throughout the long drive. Richard gripped the steering wheel, his arms heavy, his eyes glued to the wet road. In the back seat, Lily sat in silence, her head resting against the window, her eyelids drooping from exhaustion. Every time the car jolted slightly over a bump, she startled a bit, only to sink back into restless sleep. The neon lights of downtown Sunridge City bathed Richard's face, making his skin appear pale blue. He slowed down, stopping at a small roadside diner. Its sign, Harbor Light Cafe, glowed faintly in the early dawn. The smell of toasted bread and coffee drifted from the entrance, mixing with the sound of an old radio playing a melancholic country tune. Richard opened the car door and leaned in, speaking softly. Sweetheart, wake up. Let's get something to eat. Lily rubbed her eyes, looking outside. Her bare feet peeked out from under the seat, trembling slightly. He walked around, opened her door, draped his coat over her shoulders, and guided her inside. If you found yourself in Richard's situation right now, what would your first move be? Comment below and let's discuss. The diner was nearly empty, with only a waitress wiping down tables. She glanced at the pair, the tall man in a soaked suit, and the small girl with brown hair clinging to an oversized coat. Richard chose a table near the window and ordered something simple: chicken soup, a grilled cheese sandwich, and warm milk for his daughter. Lily sat quietly, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the rough wooden table. When the waitress brought the food, she didn't touch her spoon right away. Richard pushed the plate closer. "Eat. You need to get your strength back." Lily bit her lip and whispered, "Mr. Peterson said he wouldn't give me food anymore. He said our family ran out of money." Her voice was so low it was barely a breath. Richard looked up, his gaze faltering. He couldn't speak, his throat tight. Lily lowered her head, eating small spoonfuls, the bread nearly sticking with tears. Richard sat across from her, his hands gripping the edge of the table, not daring to interrupt. Every time she chewed, he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. In his mind, he heard Peterson's dry laugh, the sound of the coffee mug shattering, and the image of Lily standing in the rain. When she finished eating, he said softly, "From now on, you'll never have to ask anyone for anything." Lily looked up, her eyes wide, as if not fully grasping the meaning of his words. Richard offered a weak, trembling smile. As they left the diner, he took her to the Royal American Hotel near downtown Sunridge City. The illuminated lobby felt warm and welcoming. The receptionist nodded, seeing the soaked father and daughter, and quickly offered towels and a room key. Richard didn't give explanations. He simply said, 2 beds. Top floor. Have you ever had to make a fresh start in a completely new place? Tell me about it in the comments. The room opened to a soft yellow light. He removed Lily's coat and led her to the bathroom. Hot water steamed, fogging up the mirror. Lily stared at the mist, hypnotized, and gently placed her hand on the glass. Richard knelt beside the tub, turned down the faucet, checked the temperature, and said, "It's okay. Just warm water. You'll feel much better." She nodded slightly, standing still as he washed her face and combed her hair. The tangled strands settled slowly, revealing her small, delicate face, pale but clear. When he finished, Lily sat on the bed, curled up in a blanket, watching the steam dissipate from the bathroom mirror. Richard called room service, ordering a late-night meal: chicken soup, toast, fresh milk, and vitamins. He sat in a chair, took off his watch, and set it aside. In the mirror, he saw himself: dark circles, unshaven, a wrinkled suit. He sighed. This is the result of a father who was too busy, he thought. Lily fell asleep. He approached, pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her small hand peeked out from under the thin blanket, cold. Richard gently grasped it, his fingers tightening slightly. She breathed steadily, her cheeks sunken, her eyebrows slightly furrowed, as if still afraid. He couldn't stop looking at her. His laptop was open on the desk. The screen lit up as he typed, "Marcus Lira, family law attorney, Sunridge City." After just a few calls, a familiar male voice answered. "Richard? In the middle of the night? What's going on?" Richard looked out the window, where rain continued to fall without cease. "Marcus, I want to file for divorce and custody of Lily. I want to secure her immediately." Silence held on the other end for a few seconds. "All right. Do you have all the necessary documents?" Richard looked at the bed. "I have enough. This child is the proof." After disconnecting the call, he sent an image file from his phone photos he'd taken inside the ruined house and the debt notice taped to the refrigerator. Done. What would you do if you discovered your home had become a nightmare for your child? Drop your thoughts below. He closed the laptop and sat still, looking out the window. Outside, the rain was fine, like silver thread, and the city lights reflected in long streaked lines on the glass. Everything was so quiet he could clearly hear the beating of his own heart. Suddenly, Lily stirred and let out a soft sob. Don't leave me outside again, Mommy. Her voice was small, like the sound of wind. Richard stood up, approached and sat beside the bed, touching her hair soft and warm. I promise. No one will leave you outside again. Tears pooled in his eyes, falling onto her small hand. When the sky began to clear, a thin fog settled over the rooftops of Sunridge City. Richard called his former assistant. Today, I need clothes, children's items, and vitamins delivered to the Royal American first thing in the morning. On the other end, the woman's voice was worried. Are you okay, Richard? He simply replied, I will be. He hung up and stood to pour himself a glass of water. Just as he lifted it, his phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up with a name that squeezed his heart. Sarah. Have you ever received a call you knew would change everything? Tell me about it. The sound of rain kept falling outside the window. The morning light reflected on the table. Richard stared at his wife's name, gripping the glass so tightly that water spilled. The drops fell to the floor, mixing with the incessant sound of the phone. He hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. The glass in his hand trembled violently, water spilling onto the floor in a long streak, reaching his feet. The phone's ringtone echoed loudly in the quiet hotel room, sharp and persistent. The screen's light illuminated Richard's face, his eyes with dark circles, his hair still damp from the shower. His shirt buttons undone. Outside, the rain continued, casting faint streaks of light on the window glass. He looked at the name Sarah displayed on the screen. He waited a few seconds, then answered the call. The glass of water in his hand was still warm, but he trembled slightly. Richard? Her voice was broken, hoarse, as if trying to swallow tears just to speak. Are you still awake? He didn't respond right away, his eyes fixed on the window frame where streetlights cast long streaks on the wall. Sarah, what do you want? Just to talk. A long sigh echoed from the other end. I don't know where to start. Everything went downhill so fast. When you left, the house felt dead. Richard tightened his grip on the glass, his knuckles white. I was away on business. I didn't disappear. You could have called. You think I didn't want to? Then she laughed weakly. You never understood. You were in meetings, surrounded by money and prestige. And I was there with the kid and an empty house. Richard closed his eyes gently. But that's no reason for our daughter to have to beg for food on the street. Silence on the other end. Only the sound of rain hitting the roof and a sigh that sounded mixed with alcohol. It wasn't intentional. It's just, sometimes I couldn't take it. The alcohol helped me forget. Do you think addiction is ever an excuse for neglecting a child? Let me know your opinion below. Richard turned to look at the bed. Lily was still sleeping, hugging the blanket, her face slightly wrinkled as if having a nightmare. Sarah's voice lowered, speaking softly. Do you have any idea how terrified she was? Standing outside Peterson's house, soaking wet and hungry. Where were you? You don't understand. Mariana trembled. I was tired. I just needed a moment's rest. You left without a word, abandoning me with everything with this house. Do you think it was easy? Don't blame me, Richard. Richard spoke slowly, syllable by syllable. I sent money. I trusted you to manage it. But you chose something else. She cried, her sobs mixing with the silence. I know. I was wrong. I regret it, Richard. I just drank a little to forget the loneliness. Richard looked around the room, Lily's wet coat hanging on the chair, her small shoes placed neatly beside the bed. His daughter was curled up in the blanket, her lips moving to say something indistinct. He knew there was nothing left to forgive. Alcohol doesn't erase loneliness. Sarah, it only made you lose your daughter. On the other end, Sarah sobbed uncontrollably, then fell silent. The room sank into the space between the two ends of the line. Richard could hear the distant, cold sound of wind whistling through the cracks of his house. After a while she whispered, What are you going to do? Secure Lily, he replied, his voice firm. No, you can't. She's my daughter. She's both of ours. But only one of us is taking care of her. Sarah choked. I need a chance. Don't do this to me, Richard. Richard bit his lip, his gaze fixed on the sky outside. A chance is only valuable if a person knows how to keep it. You threw yours away. A sound of things moving came from the other side, followed by a sigh of desperation. I love you, Richard. Believe it or not, I still love you. Richard closed his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. Love won't save you. And it won't save our daughter. He spoke quietly, then disconnected the call. If someone says they love you but their actions prove otherwise, what do you believe? Comment your thoughts. The moment the dial tone sounded, the glass of water in his hand slipped from his trembling fingers, falling to the floor. The sound of shattering glass echoed loudly in the quiet room. Water spread, crawling under his feet, reflecting the light cast in a blurred streak dot in the hallway. Footsteps stopped. A night service attendant, holding a cleaning tray, peeked through the slightly open door. Richard looked down and nodded gently, indicating everything was fine. The attendant left, leaving silence behind. Richard sat down, carefully picking up the glass fragments one by one, as if handling the most fragile thing in his life. Each time a fragment cut his hand, he barely flinched. But the small drops of blood mixed with the water on the floor, then dissolved. Outside, the rain began to lessen. The faint light of dawn filtered through the curtains. Lily stirred, opening her eyes. She saw her father sitting at the table. His shirt still wrinkled, his eyes with dark circles. But in front of him was a plate of warm pancakes and a glass of fresh milk. You're up early. Daddy, she said, her voice heavy with sleep. I haven't slept. He smiled, trying to hide his red eyes. Eat, sweetheart. These pancakes are delicious. Lily ate small bites while he opened his laptop. The screen glowed brightly in the quiet space. He wrote an email to Marcus Lira with a short subject line: custody and immediate protection order. He attached the photos of the scene. Detailed notes about Lily's nutritional and psychological state, and the evidence found in the house. Slowly, he typed the last line. I need action today. He reread it a few times, then pressed send. A small ping sounded, confirming the email had gone. Have you ever had to make a decision that completely changed your life? What was it? Outside the window, the first rays of sun after weeks of rain shone into the room, illuminating the wet floor. Richard leaned back in his chair, letting out a soft sigh. A bit of warmth slid into his chest, a feeling he thought he'd forgotten. But before he could savor the peace, his phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Sarah. The screen showed, unknown number. The message appeared. Word by word, you can't take her from me. Richard sat up straight. There was no name, no emoji. But he didn't need to guess. His chest tightened. His heart began to beat faster. He opened the app, took a screenshot, and immediately sent it to Marcus with the text. Just received this. Less than a minute later, Marcus responded, adding it to the file. Don't respond. She's losing control. But don't let her know you're afraid. Richard placed the phone on the table. He sat still for a long time, listening as the rain fell harder outside. Streetlights shone through the thin curtains, creating a blurred streak of light. He stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. Below on the street, traffic was sparse. But right under the corner street lamp, a figure stood motionless. Blonde hair. A gray coat. Hands tucked in pockets. The figure was still, only the wind gently moving the hem of the coat. Richard held his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. He squinted. Even from the distance, he recognized that familiar posture. Sarah. If someone you once loved started watching you like this, how would you react? Let me know below. He slowly lowered the curtain, sweat beading on his forehead even though the room was cold. He walked around, turning off the lights to avoid being seen from outside, then returned to look at Lily sleeping peacefully in the bed, her face painfully serene. The phone vibrated again. Another message from the same number. I just want to see her one last time. Don't be selfish. Richard bit his lip, trying to stay calm. He reopened the shoebox, looking at the photo of Lily sleeping on the porch. In the rain, the image that made it impossible for him to feel any sympathy for the woman who had given birth to her. He took a piece of paper and wrote a few lines. "If she shows up, I'll call the police. But don't let Lily know about this." He left the note beside his phone as a reminder to himself. As the night progressed, the rain intensified. The wind howled softly in the hallway, and the distant sound of the ocean echoed. Richard put on a jacket and went out to the balcony. There was no longer anyone on the street, just puddles reflecting the yellow light, and the humid smell of the city after rain. He looked up at the sky. A patch of gray clouds floated past, the faint moonlight hidden behind a thick layer of fog. The room door opened gently behind him. "Daddy! Daddy!" Lily peeked out, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "You haven't slept?" Richard turned and smiled. "Just checking the rain." "Go back to bed. You'll catch cold. Are you afraid?" she asked, her voice tiny. He hesitated, then replied softly, "I'm only afraid of losing you." The girl approached and hugged him. "I'm right here." A simple statement, light as a small promise. Richard pulled her close, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. The smell of her hair mixed with her warmth made him almost forget the fear lurking outside. When Lily went back to sleep, Richard returned to the desk and opened his computer. He wrote an email to Marcus requesting to add a witness protection section for Lily in the file. "I need an urgent restraining order." "I don't trust that she stopped." After sending it, he stood and walked to the window again. Outside, the fog began to thicken, obscuring everything. But in the middle of the fog, he faintly saw a flash of light, like a reflection of metal. He squinted and saw a quick movement. Then it vanished behind the corner of the street. His heart pounded rapidly. He closed the curtains, locked the door bolt, and turned off the light, leaving only the small nightlight beside the bed. He lay down next to Lily, listening to her steady breathing, his eyes wide open in the darkness. "Do you think Richard should confront Sarah directly or let the law handle it?" Vote in the comments. The next morning, the rain subsided, and a faint light filtered through the curtains. Patricia called at the door, bringing breakfast and coffee. "Good news," she whispered. "The court has received the file. They'll sign the temporary order tomorrow morning." Richard nodded, his voice hoarse. "Thank you." He opened the shoebox one last time, reviewing each photo, organizing them into numbered envelopes. Each image was now evidence. But for him, it was a scar that would never fully heal. Lily ran over, smiling cheerfully. "Daddy, it's not raining today." He turned and smiled. "Yes, the weather's getting better, sweetheart." He lifted her and kissed her forehead. "Soon we'll go to a real home. A place where no one can make you cry again." But as he set Lily down, his eyes inadvertently looked out the window. On the street below, the silver car that had been on the corner yesterday reappeared. The car window was slightly open. Someone was inside. Motionless. Richard stood still, his hand trembling slightly. He quickly closed the curtain again, this time whispering to himself, "She won't hurt anyone else." The night in Sunridge City was wrapped in fog. Yellow streetlights cast faint hazes over the wet roads. Richard sat silently by the window, his gaze fixed on the empty street. Under the light at the end of the block, the figure in the gray coat was still there, motionless, only occasionally tilting her head, as if looking directly at his hotel room window. He hadn't slept a single minute. The entire room was silent, broken only by Lily's steady breathing from the adjacent bed. Richard looked away from the window, glancing at the drawing father and daughter had made together, that sturdy, a crude sketch. But the only thing that gave him calm amid the whirlwind of his fear. His phone vibrated. Marcus was calling, his voice through the speaker tense. "The court confirmed the hearing for tomorrow morning. I want you to keep Lily in the room. Don't go out, no matter what." Richard replied softly, "She's still out there. I can see her." "I know. But don't let her see you panic. Local police have the description. They'll increase patrols around the hotel tonight. Richard nodded gently, though he knew Marcus couldn't see him. After the call, he turned off his phone and placed it on the table. When the screen light faded, the room sank into dense darkness again. He returned to sit beside Lily's bed. She was still asleep, tightly hugging the small teddy bear. Richard gently stroked her hair, his eyes softening. Outside, sudden footsteps echoed in the hallway. Richard looked up. 3 steps, then silence. He stood and approached the door, looking through the peephole. He only caught a glimpse of a shadow sliding around the corner of the wall, disappearing. A chill ran down his spine. He checked the door lock, then returned to his spot. But that night, he never slept again. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you? How did you handle it? Share below. Then. The next morning, the hotel's fire alarm suddenly sounded, breaking the silence. Richard woke abruptly. Lily jumped up, frightened. He calmed his daughter. It's okay. Stay here with Daddy. A staff member ran down the hallway shouting, "There's a disturbance in the lobby. Police are coming." Richard walked to the window and looked down. In the lobby, a woman in a gray dress was wailing in the middle of the torrential rain, her arms flailing, her hair disheveled, her face pale. Sarah. Richard, don't take her. She's mine. Her voice echoed, broken by the downpour. 2 security guards held her, but Sarah resisted, pushing one man to the ground. Police arrived minutes later, pulling her away from the lobby area. Richard hugged Lily, his heart pounding wildly. Daddy, Daddy, that's Mommy. The girl trembled, her eyes fixed on the window glass. Look at me, sweetheart. It's okay. He spoke softly. Then he carried his daughter out of the room, taking the back staircase. Marcus was waiting in the basement garage, quickly putting on a raincoat. Quick, we need to leave immediately. Richard placed Lily in the back seat and buckled her in. As the car turned onto the main road, he looked back. Sarah was still being restrained by police, her eyes filled with tears, but her gaze with frantic rage. A part of him still felt pity. But the other part was the most primal fear, the fear that she was capable of anything. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. In the car. In the car, your predictions. In the cop, your predictions. In the comments. In the comments. In the comments. In the car. Lily looked at her father through the rearview mirror, asking softly, Daddy, why is Mommy crying? Richard gripped the steering wheel tightly. Rain hammered against the glass. He didn't know how to respond. After a few seconds of silence, he simply said, Mommy's just tired, sweetheart. But when she feels better, things will be different. Marcus sat beside him, opening his briefcase. These are all the documents to be filed this morning. Photos. Lily's medical confirmation, police reports, and Mrs. Elena's testimony. He paused, looking at Richard. We have everything we need. But you must prepare yourself mentally. Richard nodded. I know. The car arrived at Marcus's office. They spent the entire afternoon reviewing the file, organizing the sequence of evidence. Each photo, each report was numbered and categorized. Marcus said, the court won't just judge the past. They'll also assess your capacity to be a parent. Prove it with actions, not just on paper. Richard remained silent, his gaze falling on the photo of Lily smiling in the flower garden, the only one left from the peaceful years. I won't let her back into her life again. If you were the judge in this case, what would your decision be? Comment below. That evening, he called his older sister Nora in San Diego. Sis, I need a favor. I might have to leave Sunridge City soon. If the court lets me take Lily. Nora understood immediately. My house always has space. Just call a few hours before. When the call ended, Richard sat alone. Outside the window, it was still raining, with distant thunder rumbling. He could hear the sound of water running through the gutters, interspersed with the city's faint sirens. In the adjoining room, Lily was asleep. He entered and saw his daughter sitting up, her eyes fixed on the window, her brown hair slightly disheveled, her small face illuminated by the yellow light. You haven't slept? He asked, I can't sleep, she said, her voice tiny. I just want to sleep in a place where Mommy can't find me. Richard froze, a choking sensation in his throat. He sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. We'll get to a place like that. A truly peaceful home, with a garden, trees, and you'll never have to hide from anyone again. Lily nodded, curling up under the blanket. He watched her for a long time, his gaze tender but deep. In the dimness, his face showed clear signs of exhaustion. But within him was another light, the light of a father who had chosen a path with no turning back. Outside, the wind whipped violently against the window glass. He stood, closed the window latches, and gently drew the curtains. The morning in Sunridge City was humid and cold, veiled in gray fog that blanketed the city. Outside the San Miguel County Courthouse, dozens of reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing constantly. On local TV screens, headlines scrolled, "Millionaire Richard Warren seeks custody." Amid child neglect scandal. Richard stopped his car at the courthouse entrance. Marcus opened the door and whispered, "Stay calm. Today we don't need to win with words, but with the truth." He nodded slightly, breathing deeply. Lily was taken to a separate room for minors, where a child psychologist was waiting. Before leaving, the girl held her father's hand and whispered, "You'll win, right?" Richard knelt down and touched her forehead. "I just want you to be safe, sweetheart. Have you ever had to fight for something you believed in with everything you had? Tell me your story." Upon entering the courtroom, the atmosphere was cold and solemn. Footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor. White light from the high windows filtered in, making everyone's faces look tense and sharp. On the opposite bench, Sarah sat quietly, wearing a bright red dress. Her hair carefully pulled back, with light makeup attempting to hide her exhaustion. But her eyes were empty, lost. The judge, Mrs. Torres, a middle-aged woman with premature gray hair, her gaze deep and slow, spoke. Her voice was low, clear, and steady throughout the room. "The custody hearing between Richard Warren and Sarah Warren is now in session." Marcus stood, placing a thick file in front of him. His voice was calm but firm. "Your Honor, my client is not here to belittle anyone, but to protect his only daughter, Lily." He opened the file, and each photograph appeared on the large screen. The first photo, Lily curled up on the front step. The next, the girl soaked by rain, clutching her stomach. Then the debt notes, liquor store receipts, police confirmation of child endangerment. Whispers spread through the gallery. Sarah bowed her head, her shoulders trembling. Marcus continued. "This evidence was provided by a neighbor, Mrs. Elena. She witnessed Lily's condition during the 3 months Richard Warren was on business in Europe. She tried to help multiple times, but the child begged her not to call the police for fear of her mother. The air in the room was dense. Richard sat below, his hands firmly gripped, his lips pressed together. When the screen showed the image of Lily standing in the rain, the moment he had personally witnessed, his throat constricted. Marcus paused for a few seconds, then concluded his presentation. "Your Honor, this is not a typical divorce case. This is a delayed cry for help from a child who has endured too much for too long. Do you think parents who fail their children deserve a second chance? Rate from 1 to 10 in the comments." Sarah's attorney, a young man with a cold demeanor, stood up. "Your Honor, my client does not deny those images, but she asks that they be seen in context. She experienced a postmarital crisis, loneliness, and lacked spousal support. She temporarily lost control, but she still loves her daughter and is currently in psychological treatment." Sarah looked up, her eyes moist. I just want a second chance. I love her more than anything. I was wrong, but I never intended to hurt her." Her voice was choked, interspersed with sobs. Judge Torres took notes in silence, her face expressionless. She looked at Richard. "Mr. Warren, would you like to speak?" Richard stood. The room suddenly fell silent. He looked directly at the judge, then at the photo of Lily placed on the table. "Your Honor, I'm the first to blame myself. I let my work consume me, believing money could substitute presence. While I was away, everything fell apart. And my daughter paid the price with her childhood. I'm not here to point fingers at anyone. I just want to ensure she never has to stand alone in the rain again. The statement silenced the entire room. The judge stopped writing, staring at him for a long moment. The light from the window shone on Richard's face, tired but completely sincere. She nodded slightly, indicating to the court clerk to present the psychological report. The psychologist, a woman with brown hair and glasses, stood up. Through observation and conversation, Lily exhibited a strong fear reaction when hearing sounds similar to breaking glass. She avoided talking about her mother, and when asked whom she wished to live with, she responded, "I only feel safe when I'm with Daddy." No one in the room dared breathe loudly. Sarah broke into tears, collapsing onto the table. Her attorney tried to maintain composure but said nothing more. Richard closed his eyes, clenching his hands until his knuckles turned white. "If you were Lily, who would you choose? Comment your honest answer." Judge Torres gently tapped the gavel. The hearing is temporarily suspended for 10 minutes. During the break, Sarah sat alone on the bench. Everyone avoided looking at her. An officer offered tissues. She accepted, wiped her face, but her hands still trembled. Richard stayed far away, not approaching, just looking out the glass window that reflected the image of the woman who used to be his wife, now like a lost ghost. When the hearing resumed, the judge's voice was no longer cold but tinged with compassion. "After considering all evidence, I temporarily grant primary custody of Lily Warren to Mr. Richard Warren and issue a temporary protection order against Mrs. Sarah Warren until the supplementary investigation concludes in 2 weeks. Court is adjourned." The sound of the gavel striking echoed softly but decisively. Sarah leaned forward, sobbing uncontrollably. "I don't deserve it, I know. But I love my daughter." Richard turned. Marcus lightly touched his shoulder. "Don't look back. Let the law handle the rest." As they exited, reporters swarmed around them, cameras flashing ceaselessly. Richard shielded Lily, tucking her into the car. Light rain began to fall, drops sliding down the glass. Sarah still stood on the steps alone. Her bright red dress was damp, her hair stuck to her cheeks, her eyes fixed in the distance. She no longer screamed or cried. She just stood still, watching the father-daughter car drive away. What emotion are you feeling right now watching this unfold? Share in the comments. Lily sat in her father's lap, turning her head to look out the window. "Daddy, Mommy's there." Richard didn't respond, just pulled her closer, placing his hand on her warm hair. "Look forward, sweetheart." The car gradually moved away from the courthouse. But in the rearview mirror, Richard could still see Sarah standing there motionless until her figure blended with the gray rain. Back at the hotel, Marcus placed the file on the table, letting out a sigh of relief. "For now, we've won the first step. But don't forget the fight's not over. She still has 2 weeks. Richard nodded, his eyes no longer tense but deep and tired. "I'll protect my daughter, even if I have to give up everything." When Marcus left, only father and daughter remained in the room. Lily lay in bed, hugging her small teddy bear. Richard sat by the window, looking at the city. The sky was ashen, gray, but a small patch of light emerged on the horizon, a faint glimmer, but enough for him to believe this journey hadn't been in vain. He turned to look at his daughter sleeping peacefully, her face tranquil, her long lashes slightly fluttering. He whispered softly, "Soon we'll go home, sweetheart." But as he drew the curtain, outside on the windowsill, a small streak of water extended like the mark of someone who had just been standing there in the rain. "Do you think Sarah will respect the court order? Or will she try something desperate? Predict below, underscore. The wind from the pine forest brought humidity and the smell of sap. The small wooden house was isolated from the main road, nestled on a hillside covered with white daisies. This was the place Richard chose for his new beginning, a place so quiet that simply opening the door revealed the clear sound of a small stream running along the forest edge. He and Lily moved here after the temporary court hearing. No press, no commotion. Just an old wooden porch, some furniture that needed repair, and a dining table large enough for two. But for Richard, that was enough. Every morning, he made coffee while Lily brushed her teeth, changed clothes, and then ran across the porch with the small golden puppy he'd given her named Sunny, always wagging its tail as if chasing the sun. Richard took his daughter to the small elementary school a few miles away, where the teachers knew Lily's story and gave her the necessary kindness. During the day, Richard worked through his laptop. At night, he shut it down and cooked with his daughter. They read stories, played puzzles, and watched old movies together. Life seemed normal. But something still lingered silently in the air, like an old wound not yet fully healed. Lily began to smile more often. She made bright drawings: flowers, the sky, Sunny the dog, and the wooden house itself. Richard framed each drawing and hung them on the wall. He also learned to slow down, carefully preparing dinner and warm milk for his daughter before bed. What's one thing you'd do differently if you could restart a chapter of your life? Tell me below. One afternoon he arrived late to pick her up due to a long virtual meeting. The schoolyard was empty. The teacher, Miss Martha, greeted him and whispered, "I saw someone standing outside the fence for half an hour, wearing a wide-brimmed hat." I called out and she walked away. Lily didn't see anything. Don't worry. Richard froze. The old feeling returned, like a cold current of air sweeping across his neck. He nodded gratefully, taking Lily to the car. She innocently told him about her classroom activities while he, in the rearview mirror, only saw his own faint reflection in the twilight. That night, he locked the door securely and installed additional cameras around the house. Lily slept beside him, tightly hugging Sunny. The room only contained the steady sound of his daughter's breathing and the rain falling outside the porch, but Richard didn't sleep. He sat in front of his laptop, reviewing the lawsuit file, preparing for the final hearing. Near midnight, he called Marcus. "Things are stable. The kid's recovering well." Marcus's voice sounded relieved. "I heard Sarah's in a mandatory treatment program and seems to be progressing. But you still need to be cautious. You know her nature." Richard stayed silent for a few seconds, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window. "I don't understand." That night the wind was strong. He went out to the porch to collect the laundry. When he reached the fence, his heart stopped. A gray coat, soaking wet, hung over the wood. The porch light shone on it, drops of water falling to the ground. He reached out and touched it. The fabric was freezing. The strong, familiar smell of perfume was disturbingly present. Richard gripped the coat tightly, carried it inside, and placed it on the table. There was no need to speculate. He knew exactly who had been there. If you found something like this at your home, what would be your first reaction? Comment below. He didn't sleep all night. The next morning, Lily ran to the door, laughing. "Daddy, someone left me a gift." She held a small box of candy wrapped in pink paper with a white ribbon. Richard was stunned. He quickly approached, snatched the box, and opened it. Inside were chocolate candies and a card. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Mommy is always here." Richard stood still. Lily looked at him, confused. "Daddy, how did Mommy know where we live?" He didn't respond, just hugged her gently. "It's okay. Go inside." He threw the candy box in the trash, then checked the locks, the cameras, and every corner of the house. His phone vibrated. An anonymous text message. "You can't steal her from me." Another message arrived immediately after. "I see both of you." Richard felt like someone was squeezing his chest. He lifted the phone and called Marcus. "She was here. I have proof." "I have proof." Marcus responded urgently. "I'll contact the police immediately. Don't leave the house." But Richard couldn't stay still inside. Within him, fear mixed with determination. He saw Lily playing with Sunny, then said softly, "Let's visit Aunt Nora, okay? Would you run away to protect someone you love, or would you stand your ground? Let me know." 3 hours later, they arrived in San Diego. Nora's house was in a quiet suburb with a tall iron gate, rose hedges, and a large garden. Nora greeted them with a strong embrace. "You look exhausted, Richard." Lily ran, cheering at the sight of the large garden. "I'm staying here." Nora stroked her head, smiling gently. As long as you want, sweetheart. When Lily went to play with Sunny, Nora looked at her brother, her voice serious. Sarah? Richard nodded slightly. She found the house. Nora sighed, then placed a hand on his shoulder. Keep the kid here. I'll handle things outside. You need rest. That night, after Nora put Lily to bed, Richard went out to the yard to call Marcus. I brought her here. Can the court hearing be moved up? I'm trying. But you must prepare for the worst. If she violates the order again, the court will issue a location warrant for her. The wind blew cold. Richard looked toward the fence. The night was thick, only yellow light reflected in the thin fog. He walked in a circle around the yard, his phone pressed to his ear. I'm not afraid for myself. I'm just afraid she'd do something reckless. And just as he finished speaking, headlights suddenly swept across the yard. The entire garden lit up momentarily. Richard squinted, looking toward the gate. A silver car stopped, its headlights pointing directly at the fence. Then they abruptly turned off. No one got out. No sound. Richard stood still, his heart pounding heavily, his hand gripping his phone. Marcus? She's here. On the other end, Marcus stayed silent for a few seconds. Don't act alone. I'll call the local police. Stay inside the house. What would you do in this exact moment? Fight, flight, or call for help? Vote below. The light faded, leaving only darkness. From inside the window, Nora opened the curtain, looking outside. Richard gestured for silence, then moved toward the gate, his steps so soft he feared breaking the fragile atmosphere. When he reached the spot, the road was empty. Only tire tracks printed in the wet ground. The morning in Sunridge City was misty with fog. Outside the San Miguel County Courthouse, there were fewer reporters than before, but the atmosphere was still heavy. Richard got out of the car, adjusted his tie, and breathed deeply. Nora took his hand and said quietly, "Today, it ends." Lily was taken to a private room with the child psychologist. She was a little taller now, her hair carefully pulled back. Holding the small teddy bear Richard had given her, he watched her leave. A strange mix of emotions swelling in his heart, both peaceful and heartbreaking. The courtroom was brightly lit. Marcus sat beside him, the final file placed on the table. On the other side of the room, Sarah appeared in a light-colored coat, no makeup or perfume. Her eyes were less red but still had an empty look. When she saw Richard, she gave him a slight nod, a cautious, tired gesture. Judge Torres opened the session, her voice firm but warm. The hearing on custody and visitation rights for Lily Warren. She reread the process summary, the evidence, the protection order, and Sarah's psychological treatments. Marcus stood to present the report. Your Honor, my client has demonstrated his ability to provide a stable home and nurturing environment for the child. The new police report confirms that the defendant violated the protection order twice but is currently participating in voluntary treatment. He paused, looked at Richard, then at Sarah. However, my client does not seek punitive measures. He simply desires safety for his daughter. The judge nodded, moving to Sarah's presentation. She stood, her hands gripped tightly in front of her. I've sought treatment. I know I lost control. I no longer wish to fight with anyone. I just want the child to grow up without being afraid of me. Her voice was hoarse but clear, each word falling as if lifting a great burden. Do you believe people can truly change after hitting rock bottom? Share your opinion. The judge opened a new file, the psychological report from Lily's specialist. The child wishes to live with her father but is willing to see her mother under supervision, she stated. She said, I just want mommy to not be sad anymore. A long silence fell over the courtroom. Sarah bowed her head, tears falling. Richard just looked at the table silently. After a few minutes, the judge read the decision. The court officially grants primary custody to Mr. Richard Warren. Mrs. Sarah Warren is allowed supervised visitation during the first 6 months and must continue mandatory psychological treatment. This hearing is concluded. The sound of the gavel striking echoed softly but decisively. Sarah stayed still for a moment, then approached Richard. "Thank you," she said slowly, "for not letting the kid grow up full of bitterness." Richard looked at her, his gaze as still as a lake after a storm. "We both made mistakes. I just hope she doesn't have to pay the price for them." Sarah nodded gently, turned, and slowly walked out of the courthouse. Her light gray coat fluttered in the wind. Outside, the rain had just stopped. Lily ran to hug her father. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Richard knelt down, lifted her, and smiled gently. "Yes, let's go home, sweetheart." How do you feel right now after witnessing this journey? Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10 from the distance. Sarah still watched, her hand firmly holding an old photograph, a photo of the three of them when Lily was a baby. A smile that had never known darkness. 1 month later, the wooden house by the forest gleamed under the morning sun. White daisies swayed beside the porch. The sound of a dog barking mixed with a girl's laughter. Lily ran through the garden with Sunny. Her sweater splashed with dew. Her cheeks flushed. Richard stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee, looking outside. In his study, a corner of the desk held Lily's drawing, father and daughter standing under the rain. Underneath the scribbled words, "The day he came home," he smiled. The days of rushed work, all-night meetings, endless business trips, all of that was behind him. He woke to his daughter's laughter and fell asleep to the sound of his dog barking. The simple things he once considered luxuries were now his entire world. In the afternoon, light rain began to fall. Lily was no longer afraid. She opened the door, ran to the porch, tilting her face to catch the fresh drops. "Daddy, watch me!" "Daddy!" Richard chuckled, grabbing a raincoat and going outside with his daughter. He extended his hand, letting the cold water fall on his skin. "Sometimes rain falls to wash away old things," he said, his voice light as the wind. Lily looked up, smiling. "I like the rain now, Daddy." What's one lesson you've learned from Richard and Lily's story? Share below. That night, in her room, she sat at her desk, carefully writing in her new journal. Today it rained. Daddy's not scared anymore. And neither am I. Daddy says rain makes trees grow bigger. And people's hearts too. She closed the notebook, placing it on the table beside a small framed photo of her mother. The photo was taken on her 3rd birthday, when everything was still complete. Outside the porch, the wind gently moved the curtains. Warm light spilled over the window frame. Richard walked past, stopping. Lily was asleep, her small hands still gripping the drawing of the two of them standing under the rain. Beside the scribbled phrase, "Today we're home." Richard gently closed the door, leaned his back against the wall, and let out a sigh of relief. Within him, there was no longer the sound of a storm. Only the quiet sound of rain falling outside the porch, steady, soft, and peaceful. Like a complete final note to a long journey, if you could send one message to someone going through a storm right now, what would it be? Leave it in the comments. And that's our bedtime story for today. The journey of a father who crossed through darkness to find light for his daughter. A story of redemption, and how love can heal even the deepest wounds, even if it must pass through rain, wind, and old mistakes. And now that you've heard this story, how do you feel? Do you sympathize with Richard's actions, the resolute father who protected his daughter with all his heart? Or do you feel sadness for Sarah, the lost mother trying to find her way back to herself? Please leave a comment below. Tell me which character moved you most, and whose actions you won't forget. I truly love to hear your thoughts so we can keep talking about this emotional story. And one more thing, if this story touched your heart, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story about hope, courage, and second chances. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter what storm you're facing, there's always a sunrise waiting on the other side. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next story.